GrowCFO is where finance leaders grow together. Join thousands of like-minded professionals using GrowCFO to access the combined knowledge and experience of the finance leader community. You can join us today, growcfo.net.
Hello and welcome to the GrowCFO Show. I'm your host, Kevin Appleby, and today I've got a brand new GrowCFO mentor with me, Jen Burton. Now, Jen hails all the way from Indianapolis, Indiana, and is currently the Chief Financial Officer at RJE Business Interiors. Jen, welcome to the GrowCFO Show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to speak with you today. Something about me. I like to talk about, there's lots of different things about me, but I think one of the things that people, when they think about CFOs, they think about risk averse and people who don't necessarily enjoy taking chances. So one thing I will share about you is I have jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. So surprisingly, I feel like not very many CFOs are the parachuting type, but I haven't done it a lot of times, but I did muster up the courage to take that risk. So that was kind of fun.
Now, you jumped out of an airplane. You must tell me more about that.
I did. It was with my brother and a friend of mine, and we were probably early 20s, and we didn't have kids. We didn't have responsibilities per se. And we decided that it was just one of those things where I think my brother said, "Hey, we should go skydiving." And we looked around and said, "Okay, let's do it." And so then the planning began and we found the spot that we were going to go and we just did it one Saturday. That was the beginning.
Brilliant. There's something about that little story already. I can see that would you mind something, anything's achievable.
That's right. Anything is possible. So it was a good learning experience. And I think one of the things that I enjoyed learning about the most was about me. And when you're getting ready to jump out of an airplane, there's the courage, of course, to actually jump out, right? But I think you learn that you can't necessarily control everything in life. And I think growing up, and also I was always a straight A student and I was very good in the academics and things like that. And you tend to be more, you want to control the things, right? And so I think I love most about that experience is that I was able to challenge myself to just let go, and knowing that I couldn't control everything about that experience. I went through the training and of course learned how to do it and learned the safety things that I needed to do, but you really had to trust in the pilot and your instructors and also the guy on the ground who was guiding you down. And so I think it was a really good probably start in my very early career about how teamwork is so important within the workplace. You can't do everything on your own, no matter how independent you are and how much you want to achieve on your own. You have to have a good team around you. And so I enjoy having a team around me, whether that are people working in my team or others within the organizations that I've been a part of that I support. So we all need each other to succeed.
So are there any other big lessons that you'd take from that having to lose control a little bit experience into the world of being a CFO?
I think not having the control and being able to control everything in a business, you think about the financial statements, and as you go through a year or a quarter and you're driving for the financial results, you realize that you're not the salespeople, you're not the operations people making the bits. You can't do all of the pieces, but yet everyone focuses on you as the CFO to deliver the results, so to speak. And so I think out of that, the skydiving experience was something that kind of stuck with me, was that you need everybody and everybody has to do their part and everyone has to be rowing in the boat in unison and exactly the right timing and all of that in order to get across the finish line together as a team. And I think that is a really huge thing to think about when in the CFO role, because you are the focal point of all the financial results. You think of earnings calls and things like that with publicly traded companies, and there's always the focal point on the finance director or the CFO to really understand the business and talk about the results and all of that. And so I think the really important thing is that the team is, while you may be the focal point as the CFO, the team is really important. And building relationships with everybody across the organization is extremely important to be able to do what you do, but then also to help the company succeed.
Absolutely. Jen, as a mentor, you're bringing loads of experience to the table. Talk us through your career a little bit. Where did this journey to CFO start?
So oddly enough, it started off before I went to university, and I always enjoyed the math and science classes. I originally thought I wanted to be a forensic pathologist when I was a kid. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And then I realized how much I had to go to school for that. And I decided, gosh, I don't know if I want to be in school for that long. And so I started exploring some other things, and it came to my junior year in high school. And I had taken basically all the courses that I could take in getting ready for university. And so I was looking at different electives and what was I going to do? And I thought, well, I like math. And so somebody had said, hey, there's a business course, this course called accounting. And I thought, okay, well, I had a family friend that was a CPA in town. And I thought, oh, he was a nice guy. I didn't really have any idea what he did as a CPA, but I was like, he's a nice guy. And so maybe I'll just take this accounting course. And so I was 16 at the time. And I loved it. I got into that course and I absolutely loved it. There was just something that spoke to me, and the teacher was phenomenal. And we did this exercise. It was like a business simulation as part of that class. And we'd go through the class and we would learn different lessons about different things in accounting, different principles of accounting. And then they would give us a business problem or a business scenario or something. And then we had to go and in our column paper, we had to transact all of the transactions that went along with whatever that business situation was. And I loved it. I think I was always the first one done with my simulation work. And I had my column paper with all of my entries, my journal entries and all of that. And so I think it started off back then. And ever since then, that's what I knew I wanted to do. And so went through school with that in mind. I never really wavered from accounting from a university perspective, and then went on to get my CPA. So I started off, I was definitely on everyone I remember in university, you were either the public accounting track or you were the corporate or the private track. And so I always just was fascinated, I think, with the public accounting path. And I didn't even really think about the corporate path. I was very focused on the public accounting path. So I went into public accounting after school or after university. I started working at KPMG, which at the time was one of the big six firms. And I think we're definitely down. I'm dating myself now. But I started off at KPMG. And what I loved about that was it was like that 36,000 foot view of business and all these different businesses that were my clients. I dug in and I loved learning about them, and I loved learning and meeting the people and doing all of the audit things. But there came a point about 3 or so years in, and I'd gone to now these same clients for a few years, and you dig out the management letter and you'd write the same management letter. And you're like, I took out last year's work papers and basically all these same things they still haven't fixed. And there might have been a few other new things. And so there came a point in time where I was tired of writing the management letters and I just wanted to get my hands dirty. And I was like, just give it to me and let me fix it.
Totally get that. That's why I left. I qualified in public accounting as well with BDO. It's literally the day I qualified, I got out and got into industry.
Yeah.
So exactly those same reasons. Yeah.
Yep. Been doing that ever since. I went to work for one of my clients at Rolls Royce or at KPMG. One of my clients was Rolls Royce. And so I went to work through various connections at Rolls Royce. And I was there for 14 years and a lot of great experience. I loved my time there. I loved the people that I met, still in touch with a lot of those people. But somewhat similar to public accounting, I got to this point where I wanted to dig in more. I wanted to have the whole finance process. And Rolls Royce is such a big, monstrous entity. You can't really get your arms all the way around that thing. So you really had to you kind of had a narrow scope at Rolls Royce. There's a lot of depth, but it was a narrow scope. And so I wanted to go somewhere and experience a wider scope where I could get my arms around the whole business. And so from there, I went to a technology company that was based here in Indianapolis. And then from there, I was in technology and software companies for a while. And I went down from gigantic Rolls Royce to a little teeny tiny startup called Blue Lock that we eventually sold about 5 or 6 months after I started. I think we maybe had 50 or 60 people at the time. And then we kept selling all the companies that I went to. So I'm not sure if that was, if I was good luck or bad luck. I'm not sure, but everybody got an exit. Yeah. So then I've been through different industries. I stepped out of the tech industry for a little bit and went to work for another entrepreneur startup company that was in the staffing industry. So very much a people industry. And then I stepped out of that and went into some fractional CFO consulting work independently. And now I'm at RJE.
Into fractional and then back out again.
I did. You know what? I found out with the fractional, at first, I started doing that and I loved it. I worked solely in my fractional CFO role. I worked solely with startup tech companies and startup and scale up companies. So I got to experience venture capital. I'd never really done fundraising. I'd done M&A with some of the other companies that I was with, and I had bought companies, sold companies, but I had never done the venture capital fundraising aspect of that. And so I started doing the fractional CFO work, and one of my first clients they had a CFO and the CFO had left. And so I was really just filling that role temporarily until they hired their permanent replacement. And so I happened into that because it wasn't normally what I was doing as a fractional CFO. Then we started down the path of where their cash runway was getting shorter by the minute, and we had to go down the path of the fundraising. And so they didn't really want to hire a CFO mid fundraise because they thought that would be funny with the investors. So I signed on to do the whole Series C fundraise with them, start to finish, and we raised $38 million. And it was quite an experience that I had not had before. And so it was one of those things where you go into it and they're like, hey, we're going to do this Series C fundraise and are you on board? And I thought to myself, I've never really done this before, but what the heck, back to the jumping out of an airplane, you don't really know totally what to expect. But part of that is the fun of it all, where you get to explore different things. And so it was a successful fundraise and I really enjoyed doing that. But what I found at the end of as I did the fractional CFO work, what I found myself thinking back to was why I left public accounting, and that I didn't want to be that outside person looking in. I wanted to be in the thick of it. I really missed being a part of a team, and I missed having a team. So I missed that coaching and mentoring aspect that I had when I had teams of people that I worked with and folks that worked in my team. So that's why I came back out of the fractional CFO world, because I just missed, it was just me. And you were this appendage of these companies that you were supporting. And when the cash runway got low, they'd be like, oh, you're not a real employee, so we can chuck you out the door.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, Jen, I'm seeing some fantastic experience there. There's the CPA background. Nobody can ever take away, but we all know that the CPA qualification is just the start. You need all those battle scars of the mergers, the acquisitions, the fundraisers. As you say quite correctly, a lot of it is like jumping out of that helicopter. You've got to get on with it. You learn by experience. You've been in defense, manufacturing industry with Rolls Royce. You've been in SaaS businesses, and you're in an interior design business at the moment. So that's quite a mixture from an industry point of view. So what do you think you bring to the table as a mentor?
Man, I would say the biggest thing that I think I bring to the table is exactly all of that experience and the battle scars. I think I feel like I lived a lot of lives in some ways, but it's a broad range of experiences. And along that way, you figure out things that you really enjoy doing, and you figure out things that you're like, that was a great experience, but I don't think I would like to do that again. So I think the breadth of experience, for one, is something that I can for sure bring to the table as a mentor. There are a lot of things that I have experienced in, like you said, different industries as well, that whether it's M&A work or whether it's system integrations and system implementations, I did a lot of those when I was at Rolls Royce. When every time we would acquire a company, then my team worked to get them integrated onto the global template, the ERP template. So there's a lot of, for whatever reason, have developed a passion with systems and how those all work. And I've worked with a lot of them, a lot of different ERP systems, the biggest ones in the world.
That's one thing they certainly do not tell you to pass your exams.
Exactly.
Manage a change program. That's a real set of skills just by itself, that finance transformation, change management piece. And I guess that you've got lots and lots of war stories you can go back to of what worked and what didn't work and what we should have done different.
Yes. One more story I'll share is when I was at Rolls Royce, we decided to, I don't even remember how the decision exactly came about, but it was more along the cost savings. And we were constantly, as every business is trying to figure out how to maximize profit. So, how do we sell more and spend less? It's an age old equation, right? And so we decided in the finance world that we were going to design and implement a global finance shared services strategy. And that strategy encompassed one global finance shared services organization, but deployed regionally. So we had regional finance shared service centers. And as you can imagine, when we said we were going to do that, all the businesses, all the MDs, they each had their own FDs, and then they have each of those teams, and each business unit had their own kind of finance teams and accounting teams, and some were geographically placed and some were business centric. And so everybody, there was a bit of a mutiny of, you're not sucking my finance person into your finance shared services. And ultimately, so that was a multi-year process to introduce that strategy and then to bring people along into the strategy. And I was a part of the steering group that created the strategy and worked to implement the strategy. And then at the time, I was a finance director in the engineering and technology group. And so I wasn't actually in the finance service center. I was outside of that, but I was part of the steering group that created the strategy and executed and implemented it. And so about a year into it, everybody was frustrated with the finance service center and they weren't getting what they thought they were going to get from this. And so internal customer satisfaction, I should say, was not good. And we were scratching our heads because on paper, I mean, it made complete and total sense, but that change management piece was hard. And I think, so I remember going to our regional CFO at the time, who was we were in a matrix situation. So he was my finance boss, but I also had a business unit boss, but he was my finance boss at the time. And I was like, gosh, this didn't exactly turn out the way that we had envisioned it. And I said, I just don't know that we have the right people in the roles to make this change management work. And so I made the mistake of saying, man, if I could just get my hands on it for a little bit, I could fix it and we can go off. So about, I don't know, 6 months later, I get
here's the job, Director of Shared Services.
Yeah. And so my last 5 years or so at Rolls Royce was exactly that. And it was interesting, but I learned a lot from that role because I learned it's back to that we all need the team, right, to make things happen. And we need to have the right people on our team. So we need to have the right people in the seats and we need to have everybody rowing all together. And so I learned a lot about just managing people in that I had a team of about 60 some direct, well, not all direct reports, but direct and indirect, a whole team of 60 some people. And we needed everybody to do their part. And at one point I was like, well, I should have never opened my mouth because I've opened that can of worms, but it was painful at the start, but we turned it around. And by the end, by the time that I left Rolls Royce, we were humming. We had a great team. Our customer satisfaction was up in the 90s from when we first measured it was like 50 some percent. And so we made a big turnaround. And I think a lot of that had to do with just having the right people in the right seats and really understanding the people and what they wanted to do and playing to their strengths and using their talents. And I didn't get it right by any means to start. It took me 5 years to get it how we wanted it, but it was one of those things where I shouldn't have opened my mouth. But in the end, it was a good experience. Just like everything you learn, you dive in, you're not really sure what you're doing, but you figure it out and you learn a lot and you grow along the way.
Yeah. So we found that 90+% of new CFOs probably suffer from imposter syndrome or certainly lack of confidence. Mm-hmm. So 2 questions here. Is that something that you've suffered from? And how would you approach a mentee that was suffering from it?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm sure I have suffered from that at various points. I can't think of like a specific instance where I was like, oh my gosh, this is self-diagnosed. This is what I'm suffering from. But I think everybody loses their confidence along the way at some point in time. For CFOs, there's a lot coming at you. And I think there's an expectation that whether it's a finance director or a finance manager or a CFO in a finance leadership position, there's a lot of expectation and there's a lot of assumption that you just know what you're doing all the time. And everything that comes up, you just,
I
know.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think a lot of
the reasons we developed the CFO competency framework was to actually articulate all of those things that the CFO was supposed to know about. So we've got 9 competencies, 5 skills in each competency, 45 skills in total, ranging from superb interpersonal skills, change management skills, finance transformation skills, governance skills. And one of the things we realized very early on was that nobody's ever going to be able to be an expert at all of them.
Exactly. And I think that how I would approach a mentee in that situation is I think I would want to understand what all is on their plate. I'd want to help them. I think the biggest thing is growing your network, and whether it's a mentor or even just other like individuals, peers, right, along the way, that you feel comfortable and confident that you can ring them up and say, I have no idea how to do this. And my manager is expecting me to have this done in 2 weeks' time, and I don't even know where to start. You have to have somebody, because that will happen. That will happen to everybody. When I started down the path of that Series C fundraise, I was like, oh, I'm not sure I know how to do this. And everybody's looking at me like, oh, you're the CFO, so you know how to do fundraising, right? I know the gist of it. And, but you just have to dive in. And so I think it's helping them to find the courage to dive in, but also an understanding that you'll learn a little bit as you go, but also you need to have some of those life preservers outside of the process, whether that's a peer, whether that's a mentor, that you can bounce ideas off of, and that you're not intimidated or you're not afraid to just ask the dumb question. And I think that's the hardest part, right? Is when everyone's coming at you and thinking that you have the answers or feel like you should have the answers and you don't feel like you have the answer, it's easy to lose confidence in yourself, I think. But if you have those trusted advisors that you can reach out and just say, where I can say, Kevin, I don't know how to do this. I really don't know how to do it. And Kevin, you coming back to me and saying, okay, well, let's just take it in one bite-sized step at a time. And that's how I approach those challenges is, what's the next bite-sized step that I need to take? And do I need to find a mentor? Do I need to seek out a peer that has this experience? Do I need to go find a book about venture capital and understand how that works a little bit more? So I think it's finding those. And when you look at the whole thing, it seems really overwhelming. But if you can break it down into bite-sized pieces and think about, okay, what is the next step that I have to do? Knock that out. And it builds your confidence up as you go, because you can knock out those pieces as you move forward. And then you feel like you've accomplished something. It's like, okay, this isn't as overwhelming as what I thought it was going to be. So I think that's how I would approach it. But building that confidence is a tough one.
And I don't think there's anything particularly complicated about any of these big things that we do as CFOs. And I've never been through a fundraise at all in 40-year career. But I've read enough about the process, interviewed enough guests on the podcast, looked at a fundraising simulation GrowCFO that, hang on, this is probably end to end. It's probably quite an involved process. There isn't actually a single step within this process that I'd actually describe as difficult.
But it can be very overwhelming to start if someone just drops into your lap and says, okay, we're going to kick off this fundraise and we're aiming to raise $50 million by in 3 or 4 months' time. And you're kind of like, ooh, where do I even start? Right.
Where do you start? Yeah.
But once you get to that starting line, and that's where I think is really the critical thing, is it's almost like good project management, right? If you can map out, even if you can't map out the whole process, if you can just say, okay, I know I need to start here. I need to build a virtual data room because I need to put all this stuff in it that people are going to look at. And I need to start with a standardized deck, right? A pitch deck, and whatever the problem is. And maybe it's not fundraising. Maybe you're building a new financial model where your CEO says, hey, we need to build a forecast model. And can you have that by next week? And you're like, oh, but you've never built a financial model before. And so you just start stepping through the pieces. Okay, you know what the income statement looks like. You know what the balance sheet looks like. Forget about the balance sheet for a second and let's focus on one at a time. And so you start with the P&L and you start with revenue. Okay, how do we get our revenue? What does that look like? What do I need to know in order to forecast out what revenue is? And so you start just putting the pieces together. And if you start at the top of the P&L and you work your way down, then eventually look at that. You've got a forecast model. And yeah, so it's just a step by step, and bite-sized pieces is what I would say the secret to success is there.
Yeah. So apart from you telling us about jumping out of a helicopter at the start of recording, we've been very much concentrating on Jen, the finance professional, Jen, the CFO. Tell me a little bit about Jen outside of the office.
Jen outside of the office. Well, my husband and I have a blended family. So between us, we don't have kids together, but between us, we have 5 kids. So that's a lot. The ages range from 20 to 15. So we've got some kind of nudging their way out of the nest and some still in the nest and everything in between.
Teenage problems, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, right.
The 2 sets were bad enough.
Yeah. So there is a set of twins in there. And life has been centered around the kids mostly. And my husband and I are now trying to figure out what does life look like when the kids are left. They all but one can drive now. So they're kind of off on their own to the Uber mom.
That makes a huge difference when it's not mum or dad's taxi.
Right, exactly. So we're figuring that out. Love to be outdoors. My husband is a triathlete. So he's done 2 full Ironmans and a lot of sort of half Ironmans and a lot of littler, smaller triathlons.
That takes commitment.
Yes, a lot of commitment there. So we support each other. We're both active into fitness. I have done triathlons, but not like he does. I did take up running. I hated running when I was a kid, but I played a lot of sports when I was a kid. So later in life, I got into running. And then all my friends started getting injured. And I thought, oh, maybe I need to diversify a little bit. So I started diversifying into strength training. So I still do a lot of walking and hiking and a lot of resistance training, probably about 5 days a week. So yeah, my husband and I grew up on a lake. So I grew up water skiing and doing water things and being outside a lot and swimming. And so my husband and I, right before COVID happened, we bought a little fixer-upper on a lake up in a little bit north of here, about an hour and a half north of here. And I've become addicted to HGTV and home remodels and things like that. So it's been sort of our project, but it was perfect timing. Unbeknownst to us, COVID happened. And so it was nice at that point in time when everybody was at home. A few days of the week, we would just pop up to the little cabin because it was just looking out of different windows for a while. And it's on the water. And so we love going up there even still. And to-do list is still a mile long. But
that's the thing with projects like that, the to-do list only ever seems to get longer, never gets shorter.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the case. But I think we figured out when we first got it, it was in pretty rough shape. And so our goal was just to get it livable. And so we would go up there every weekend and we would just spend the whole weekend, like sun up to sundown, working on the to-do list. And then a friend of ours up there said to us, there's always going to be a to-do list with a lake property. There's always something going wrong that you've got to fix. And he said, you really need to make sure that you take time and enjoy it. And from that point forward, the list certainly hasn't gotten shorter, but because I feel like as soon as we knock something out, something else is added to the list. But we have set ourselves a rule that we'll go up on a Friday after work, and Saturday we'll work until 4 or 5, and then the rest of the time we're enjoying it. So we definitely need to balance that a bit more in the beginning. And so now I feel like we have a good balance. Sometimes we'll go up now and we don't do anything on the to-do list, and then we go home on Sunday and feel like failures because we didn't mark anything off the list. But
unwound failures.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So
Jen, it has been really fantastic chatting to you. And I hope we've given the audience a good feel of you and what you're all about. If you're in a position that you feel that you can make use of a mentor, well, the first question I would ask somebody in that position is, and what sort of a mentor do you want? And that's going to be a mixture of, I want somebody from the industries I'm in. I want somebody who's been through these big change programs. I want somebody who's got experience of fundraising or selling a business. Well, we've heard some of that from Jen today. We've heard the other side of Jen, the mom, the property renovator, the amateur athlete. If you could feel a chemistry there, then get in touch with us. And the first thing that we would do at the start of any mentoring relationship is we'd set up a chemistry call properly, because the chemistry between mentor and mentee is so important. You have to hit it off as individuals, as well as have the mentor with all the right skills. And more than skills, it's all of the right war stories that you can tap into. And really, that is the role of a great mentor. It's, you've got this problem. I've had that problem a couple of times. First time I tried it like this. Second time I tried it like that. Here's what went right and wrong in both of these. Now let's see how we apply that to your situation. That's the real way. A mentor is very different to a business coach. Now, a coach asks you to get the answer yourself and just guides you on the way. A mentor brings all that experience to the room. Been there, done it, got the t-shirt. So, Jen, once again, thank you for being this week's guest on the GrowCFO Show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.